this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
First it was Ricky Pearsall, done for the year. Then it was Luther Burden with a groin injury. Then it was Emeka Ibuka with a toe injury. Mekhi Lemon hasn't practiced in weeks. Jeremiah Love has a high ankle sprain. Breece Hall's banged up. Jordyn Tyson's out for a couple months with his hammy that he can't get right. But hey, Rich, hey, at least we got some good CLV with Keenan Allen. I'm JJ, and over the last couple of years, I've been doing everything I can to be a best ball bro. And last season, things finally fell into place. I got 40th in the DraftKings Millie contest, taking home $20,000. Maybe I became a best ball bro, but I'm still looking to learn more about this game. And I still want others to come on this ride with me. So even if you consider me a best ball bro, this could be your year. This could be the year that you officially become a best ball bro. This episode is sponsored by DraftKings. We've partnered up with DraftKings again this year for Best Ball, and we've got a can't-miss offer on their biggest Best Ball contest ever. $20 million in total prizes. It's draft one, get one. Draft your team once, no weekly lineup management, and your top scorers start automatically each week, all season long. Download the DraftKings Daily Fantasy app and sign up with promo code LATEROUND. Enter a lineup in the $20 million Best Ball contest for $25 and get a bonus ticket for a second entry. 2 shots at the title. Draft one, get one, only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Welcome into another episode of Becoming a Best Ball Bro. I'm JJ Zacharyson, joined as always by Rich Ryan. Rich, what's going on, buddy?
JJ, my wife and I were sitting down last night, watching some Netflix, watching 4 Seasons. Shouts to Steve Carell. Everything
great
that guy,
show. Good show.
Everything that guy touches is gold. Yeah. And I get the notification that Keenan Allen has signed with the Indianapolis Colts, and I fist pumped so hard. Jen was like, "What are you so excited about?" I'm like, "My guy JJ had a rough one today, and I'm glad he ended it with a dub."
I needed something to happen favorably because man, it feels like every, especially wide receiver that I've talked about in the draft guide that I've been drafting a decent amount of has gotten hurt at some point. You know, now we have this lingering toe with Emeka Ibuka. The big thing though was Jordyn Tyson. I actually, I was looking at my best ball. I'm overweight on Jordyn Tyson, but it's not as much as it could have been because I'm pretty high on him just as a player, as a prospect, all of that. And yeah, I mean, let's just talk about that right now because I think that's the big news with best ball at the moment. I think that Jordyn Tyson is still draftable. I know a lot of people are going to just take him off their board because of the injury. And look, of course we knew that this injury thing was a thing with Jordyn Tyson. I wrote about it in the prospect guide. It was a reason why I had him in the same tier as Carnell Tate. Otherwise, if there were no issues at all, he was technically a better prospect in my eyes. Like he would have been a tier above. And, camp over the last few weeks, I know it's just camp, but my gosh, the hype with Jordyn Tyson was really there. Nick Underhill is one of the best beat writers in the country, let alone the best for the Saints. And he was saying that Jordyn Tyson at some point this season had a very real chance to be the best player on the Saints roster. He's not one to just say things like that. He's a very, thoughtful beat reporter. And it just goes to show how well Jordyn Tyson was performing. And so I felt good about the talent evaluation part. The obvious part that was, the issue with Jordyn Tyson as a prospect. And the issue right now is that he's gotten hurt. Now, I will say, I think that the broken collarbone that he had is just not a deal that I think has anything to do with this at all. Maybe you could say that the ACL that he suffered a few years ago could be, a part of this and why this hamstring thing has seemed to be lingering because he suffered the hamstring last year. He dealt with it during the draft process. And then obviously they're saying that this is disconnected. This has nothing to do with, any of that. I think that's probably BS. I mean, it's your body all functions as one. It's not like you have these independent muscles that don't touch each other. With that being said, and this, for the record, I'm also parroting what smart people like Jeff Mueller on Twitter, a PT, is saying about this. With that being said, I do have the general stance that players are injury prone until they're not. And, we do this all the time with players, and it's very hard when football's not being played and there's not as many storylines going on and such to not dive all into this one storyline and like overinflate it in a way within your mind. But I'm trying to not do that. Obviously, I have priors. I think Jordyn Tyson is a phenomenal prospect, right? So, take this with a grain of salt. I still think he's draftable because what if he does get it right? I drafted Jordyn Tyson last night in one of the $100. I finally got that to fill because they have a 3-entry $100 tournament. And I got my third entry in, and I got Jordyn Tyson in the 140s last night, which to me is certainly the best, the right kind of risk reward when I went pretty wide receiver heavy early. And so I knew that, they could have coverage early in the season while Tyson's out. And then the question is like, what if he gets right? This is not it could end up being a 0 for sure, but so could a lot of players in that range in general. So I don't want to, overstate what that really means. But the way I kind of see it right now, I really like Casey Concepcion. I liked him a lot as a prospect. I thought Concepcion was in the same tier as Mekhi Lemon when they came out, when a lot of people had, Lemon sort of a tier above. I think Concepcion's a really good player. Tyson should still be drafted behind him. Probably in that, after that, Coker, Romeo Dobbs, Jaden Higgins apparently is banged up. We just learned that right before we hit play here. or record here. So understand that could be changing. But right after that tier, I think is where Jordyn Tyson kind of belongs. So, it's a risk tolerance thing. You got to do what you feel most comfortable doing. Now, look, I mean, the season starts later this year. So this could be he could be playing as soon as week 4 or 5, realistically. I don't think that's going to happen. I think they slow play it. I'm hoping they can figure this out the way that, another good example of this idea of players are injury prone until they're not is Christian Watson, where it seems like no one's really talking about his hamstring stuff simply because he had a second half of last year that was brilliantly good and he didn't get hurt. And now no one's really talking about this, but that's what I'm saying. This kind of thing can shift in an instant. I'm not dismissing it at all. I think it's a very real thing. I'm just trying to be level-headed, or as level-headed as I can be. And to me, I think in that, if you can get them in the 140s, that's great. But, after that, group of wide receivers in a best ball environment, go for it. I think in a season-long environment, I know this is a best ball show, but in a season-long environment, you can even go a little bit earlier because obviously you're not taking zeros and you can drop the guy if you want to and pick up someone else. Or better yet, if you have an IR spot, you can just stash.
Yep.
So, it's really bad news for Tyson. It's bad news for anyone who probably listens to my content. This is a risk that we took on and it's something that, came to fruition. I just hope and pray that, the end of the season, we look back and Jordyn Tyson is still a beast of a wide receiver and he's really productive in the Saints offense, which I think he was going to be really productive in the Saints offense. But this is the way it goes sometimes in fantasy football. You take risks. Sometimes they work out. Sometimes they don't. Let's hope they work out more than they don't.
That range that you've identified does feel right. The next receiver going off the board is Rashid Shaheed at the top middle of the 12th round. I still think that's kind of coin flippy. I think you and I are both interested in Shaheed. He's one of your higher exposed players. But then you're talking about Denzel Boston, Jalen Naylor, Malik Washington, Jalen McMillan.
There's zero chance I'm taking Jalen Naylor over Jordyn Tyson.
Right.
I just, or even Malik Washington. There's just not, those just aren't the guys that I'm going to get that excited about. I also think, again, you should be looking at what your build looks like earlier on. I think that I could actually talk about something that I wanted to talk about on today's show, which is thinking about what the early season means and how different the landscape looks in the early parts of the fantasy season versus what it's going to look like in the fantasy playoffs or, week 10, week 11. Keep in mind that if Tyson's out the first 5 or 6 weeks, and of course he could come back and get hurt and, things can still go on. I'm not saying that he comes back and then he's never going to get hurt again. That would be crazy to think that. But the nice part is when these guys have injuries that are bumping up into the season, we have a lot of guys like Emeka Buka, Luther Burden. I mean, Breece Hall just got banged up, but it doesn't sound that bad. Those guys have timelines that are pushing right up into week 1, right? And Kenyon Sadiq's another one where seems like he's getting better, but and they're saying that he's going to be available week 1. Who knows what ends up happening there? But the thing that I think that best ball managers should keep in mind, at least what I've been telling myself, and this is through, talking to people over the last couple of years and kind of learning this game a little bit more. It makes a ton of sense too. It's that in the early parts of the season, there's no bye weeks and everyone's healthy, right? So again, I told you about that team that I drafted yesterday where I got Jordyn Tyson, in the 140s. I think I had Carnell Tate as my wide receiver 5 or something. It was a wide receiver heavy room. And so that I went with, or maybe 4, and then I got another wide receiver in the middle rounds. But regardless, it was a good wide receiver room. Like Amon-Ra St. Brown's on it. Devontae Smith's on it. I think I got a wide out in round 4. And so I sat there and I said, okay, I can take on Jordyn Tyson a lot more easily right now because he might not have even found my lineup the first 5 or 6 weeks of the season, And then it's not until players break down, bye weeks start happening, that you really need to think about that and worry about that more. I think in general too, I'm in this place where I'm trying to not be so hyper focused on these players that are banged up right now. Like I know there's the mantra of like, you don't want to draft injured guys. Everyone's going to get hurt at some point or has the risk of getting hurt. You don't want to start, like being delayed or start from behind with some of those players into the fantasy season. But you're getting discounts, man. Like there's a big difference between those guys staying at the exact same price and those guys not, which is exactly why I am mega overweight right now, Rich, on like Kenyon Sadiq, for instance, right? Where I've gotten him in like round 18 at times, right? Like in literal dart throw territory. We're going to be shocked when we look back at this season because it happens every single year. And you look at the players we were drafting in round 18 and the amount of zeros that are littered through our lineup from those players because they're just not doing anything. Maybe they give you one, usable week. I have a hard time envisioning a world where Kenyon Sadiq doesn't give you at least like 2 or 3 usable weeks this year, as long as he's healthy to some degree. And I know that's the big question mark, but you're getting him at such a discount in comparison to the other players being drafted in that area. So like, I think it's a little bit different when you're talking about same tier players. Like I haven't really been touching Emeka Egbuka as much. I have enough of him. And I don't want to, I'll gladly just take Zay Flowers over him or Devontae Smith or even Jalen Waddle. I think you can go with, even though he's a little bit banged up, but he seems healthier than where Egbuka's at. But with late round guys, especially, it's a lot easier to just take that on. So like, I remember last year, a good example of this is Devon Achane was really banged up or seemingly, right? He had that like calf injury or something like that. And I had not drafted much Ollie Gordon throughout the summer. I was on the Jalen Wright train like into July. And then I just stopped drafting backup running backs for Miami. I had a lot of Devon Achane last year, but then the Achane injury is happening and it's lingering. And I'm like, oh man, I got to overcorrect and just draft all of this Ollie Gordon without really thinking about like, what is the true bull case for Ollie Gordon? Right. And then in hindsight, of course, it was a terrible pick. Like all of those rosters I had with him, were not as strong. And I can say that a lot more confidently right now, given how like the last year's season was good.
Right, exactly.
It's a little bit more difficult whenever you have a bad season and you made those stupid mistakes. But, I'm trying to not overthink that aspect of things because generally it's actually not as bad, I think, anecdotally as people make it seem. And again, I mean, best ball is a playoff game, right? Like you're trying to advance, of course, but there's other players that can help you advance and you want to have good talent and just monster teams as you get into the playoffs.
Yeah, caution is okay. The other example from last year that I remember is Matthew Stafford and the back injury and the question marks that we had around not just Stafford himself, but the Rams pass catchers as well, where there was some sort of discount baked in there because we just didn't know the status of Matthew Stafford and the Rams are just being extra careful with an older player. I've said this before, Jets specifically. My information is that they're just slow playing all of these injuries.
Yeah.
Sadiq had his helmet on today.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just, what's the point, especially with soft tissue leg injuries? What's the point of having these guys sprint and run around in August when we have an 18-week violent gauntlet that is coming to us in a couple of weeks? So, yeah. And again, the Pierce one, where teams are giving you a timeline and those timelines aren't being met, that's when we should sound the alarm and ring the bell.
And like Jordyn Tyson is a sound the alarm situation. Like Jordyn Tyson is a very scary situation where he's had this bad hammy and it just keeps popping up. Alec Pierce is a very scary situation where he hasn't been practicing. You see clips of him like still limping a little bit. And then the team goes out and signs Keenan Allen. I mean, like, could it work out? Sure. Are there some drafts where I might get him? Maybe, but you have to have a pretty big discount because there are more obvious signals and signs that it's going in that direction. And then there's some teams like Todd Bowles is one of the worst when it comes to injury stuff and trying to figure out where things are at there. With that being said, I think it's pretty clear now that we know it's a turf toe thing for Egbuka, and that's something that can linger a little bit. I wrote about that in the draft guide last week. So Yeah, I mean, overall, I'm trying to take a case by case, but understanding that, teams are going to slow play things. I think they did that with like Devon Achane last year, for instance. But when there's like a very clear indication, I think Pierce and Tyson are the two that are most obvious here. When there's a very clear indication, that's when we should be really adjusting our priors a little bit and thinking about these players a little bit different. All right, I'm going to get into a couple of other things. I've found that late round picks right now are becoming pretty difficult to navigate. Now, I've been sort of like auto clicking Keenan Allen so much that's why that was a really nice, end of my day of him at least finding a team. I'm not even expecting Keenan Allen to dominate, but I mean, the dude is seeing good target shares in his past couple of spots, amongst like relatively decent competition overall in Chicago and then with the Chargers. And now I would argue competition is weaker overall. I mean, Tyler Warren should get his. Josh Downs, I'm still excited about. But overall, clicking Keenan Allen in round 19 over and over again, I think is a W overall. But, Cyrus Allen, Caleb Douglas, Pat Bryant, those players have risen up draft boards quite a bit. And it's just difficult to really have a ton of conviction about round 18, round 19, round 20 players. And I think that if you're feeling that, I just wanted to shout that out, that you're not alone in feeling that. Have you experienced that too, as you're drafting in the very late rounds?
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like I'm pivoting back to some of my early summer ideology of when in doubt in these later rounds, just leave a spot open for tight end and just click guys that we know the 12 revolution and the heavy formation meta. We know that's a thing in the NFL. Now we have Darren Waller even signing with Carolina, who becomes a reasonable enough dart towards the ends of drafts. So yeah, I'm just leaving room for some tight ends at the back end of my roster. And that's just a very comfortable click for me for guys that are just going to be on the field and scoring points.
Yeah, agreed. And like even like Michael Mayer types will still go in the 20th round. And I think he's going to have some usable weeks. And then he obviously has contingent upside if Brock Bowers, please don't. But if Brock Bowers were to get hurt this year.
The tape was off today.
I love, he like put duct tape on and then everything got better. That was with his PCL. But yeah, I agree. I think that the tight end stuff is very relevant and real, that you don't want to necessarily like reach on. I've had a really hard time without a stack drafting a player like Hunter Henry, where I'm like, I know I can wait at tight end. I don't think he's going to be a difference maker necessarily. And if it's not in a stack, I'd rather just wait. I can't say the same. I'm still drafting Terrence Ferguson in round 15, even though he's gotten steamed up a little bit. The two tight ends that I'm going to have the most exposure to more than likely are definitely Terrence Ferguson, and then probably Sadiq, like I was saying before, just because his price keeps falling and tumbling. But I'm trying to not overthink this of a mid-first round uber athlete tight end who's very young, incredibly young, had pretty tough competition in college, and his age-adjusted production profile was, at the very least, slightly above average. But I think it was just above average in general, right? In a tight end-friendly offense, too. Frank Reich's offense has been historically really tight end-friendly. I'm just trying to not overthink that. So I'm still going after those like sexy names in the later rounds of drafts at tight end, because I think that that's just what you should be doing at tight end year in and year out for the most part. Depends on your roster build, depends on that construction, but it's been the direction I go in. I think you can still take 4. I mean, we've said that sort of all off season.
Even a guy like Tonjes has the contingent upside of an older tight end coming off of a major injury. And again, a tight end friendly offense, like you said. He's a very reasonable click in those late double. I
mean, I've drafted 4 tight end builds. I've gotten Eli Raritan as a last round pick, and going that route. I love the Michael Mayer pick, though. I still think Michael Mayer is just like he should probably be going a round or two earlier than he is. I know it's the late round. It's not the biggest deal in the world, but the overall theme here is that the later round picks are becoming a little bit more difficult because, on one hand, the market's reacting properly, and it's looking at, beat writer notes and what they're saying out of camp. And they're saying, oh, I'll just draft this guy 1 or 2 rounds earlier because why not? It's the late rounds. But then also we're getting more clarity, right? Like we like now officially, not that, I mean, I did all summer to be fair, but we like Pat Bryant more than Troy Franklin. There's going to probably be a bigger role for Bryant versus Franklin, which makes tons of sense because Bryant can be a very good slot player for them and he can play out of 11 personnel. That was kind of the logic as to why I had him, ranked ahead earlier this summer and was drafting him. But, he's crushing it in camp. I didn't expect him to crush in camp the way that they're talking about him. But, that's separated those players. There've been players that are separating Caleb Douglas, separating from some of the rest of the pack, although Chris Bell is apparently healthier than we all expected. So it just made
Dolphins offensive line looked sneaky, very competent.
The Dolphins offensive line is not that bad. The fear for me with like an Achane is still just the pass catching stuff and what that's going to look like, in this offense. But yeah,
this is more of a Malik Willis.
Malik Willis, Malik Willis to me is especially in season long, the easiest click on the board. Period. Right. In best ball, I kind of get but I'm still just drafting him in a lot of, especially 3 quarterback builds. Yeah, that's like the perfect QB3. I'm with you. I think that Miami can be decent enough. And then the other thing that I wanted to talk about, all of these injuries are making round 6 just suck. And I think it's a really good thing for what that means for back half of round 1 picks, because when you get into the late 5th and early 6th, some of those guys will tail into the early 6th round. And so you get, before a big teardrop, you get that 6th player that the front half of the draft won't be able to get, right? That's pretty important because like getting Jahmyr Gibbs, which I won't complain about draft slots too much on this show because I know it is truly random, but is it truly random for JJ Zachariason? I'm not sure. After, I'm like 130 millis in, and I have like 6 Jahmyr Gibbs. I got like 6 101s. I got a little bit more Jahmyr Gibbs just because I've gotten him at 102 sometimes. But regardless, having that advantage, especially at the 2-3 turn where now Malik Neighbors is there and you feel better about him. And I think it's a nice advantage for, to even things out a little bit more for the back half of round 1. I felt very lucky today. I was in the 104 in a milli, and Carnell Tate, I got him in the 6. It seems like I'm really high on Carnell Tate. I think I'm actually underweight on Carnell Tate. It's just, he just popped up a couple times in the last couple of drafts, but he fell. I say fell, but I got him in the 6th, like towards the end of the 6th. And then I somehow got Ramondre Stevenson in the 7th, which to me is just not going to happen as frequently anymore. Not just because of the way that backfield has trended, but also just because of the way that injuries have piled up and all of those guys are just being pushed up, right? The back half of the 7th round I could argue that the back half of the 8th round is better and more appetizing than the back half of the 7th round right now in ADP. So, it really, really drops off. And if you're experiencing that, if you're feeling that, I think you're thinking logically about this.
So when I saw you put 6th round on the sheet, I wanted to bring up 2 guys. One was Ramondre Stevenson. The other is Jonathan Brooks. And it feels like the populace is pulling them into the 6th round because let's say they're not going Burrow or Drake May, and they're not happy with that teardrop at receiver after like Watson and Dunze. They're like, well, what are we going to do? And what they're doing is Brooks, every week Brooks stays healthy and looks good. Like he's up 40 picks since we started doing the podcast.
Yeah. I'm to the point now in best ball where I think the gap between Brooks and Hubbard is too big. Hubbard's another one of those guys that we could have talked about earlier that, his injuries kind of bumping up into week 1 and maybe it lingers. And look, I'm very pro Jonathan Brooks. I was my bags are packed with Jonathan Brooks. Trust me. But I'm trying to think logically, like, you're now taking on a much more significant opportunity cost. I think the only reason why Brooks is being drafted where he's being drafted, to your point, is because there is this big drop off.
People are like, what do I do?
And people are like, sure, I'll take Jonathan Brooks. Why not? So like from that perspective, I can't really blame people. But when you look at a draft board and you're like, whoa, Jonathan Brooks is like a late 6th round pick right now. And like, that's where he's going pretty frequently. It's objectively pretty rich. I can say that comfortably because I have so much 9th and 10th round.
I was going to say you have 10th round Jonathan Brooks. That's way different than
right. So like, I don't need to force the issue. I think that if you need to, though, you can do it still because of that drop off that we were talking about. I'd still be drafting Ramondre over him. I'd still want that safety. But if you go pretty running back heavy and he's like your RB3 or 4, I don't think it's the end of the world. And you're going for that upside. If he's the guy, he's the guy, that you need. But again, like there are drafts where I never envisioned myself being into Chuba Hubbard this year because I had Jonathan Brooks and him basically back to back during the summer. And, there's a much wider gap in ADP at that point. But now it's, awarded me to get some Chuba Hubbard. But again, if you haven't gotten Brooks, this isn't me being like, hey, look at my Brooks bags. This is me saying like, if you haven't gotten Jonathan Brooks, I don't think it's like egregious to be drafting him there because there's so much ambiguity in that range. I still think going quarterback, going Ramondre, going Jalen Warren, that's probably better. But I get it. I can understand the logic there.
I mean, the name just still screaming at me in this area is Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts is down 3 picks since we started.
I know. I got him in
podcast.
the. I've got him in the late 7th pretty frequently. Like it's pretty wild to me, especially if you look at his numbers last year, they didn't use him much on design runs. Like he had like 40 fewer design runs last year, and they're already talking about how they want to up that this year. There's already been reports about that too. So yeah, I mean,
all of his pieces not named Devontae Smith, you can backstack with.
Yeah,
you can gamble on Mekhi Lemon.
You can get Dontavian
right
Wicks.
There.
Dontavian Wicks is really. I mean, that's another guy who's been rising. Dontavian Wicks. So I've still clicked because again, it's just kind of like a dead zone of players once you get into round 14 to 20.
It's still in the 150s for Dontavian Wicks. So like you said, it's not like
right. It's not
the cost.
I think he's going to be used too. Yeah. All right, let's get to our guest today. I talked to Chad Candles. He's a YouTube streamer on his channel at Chad Candles. This is one of the great things about becoming a best ball bro is kind of getting introduced to the best ball community a little bit more and meeting people that probably wouldn't have met if I were only doing, season long content or dynasty content or what have you. And this conversation was awesome. Chad's super sharp. We talked about preseason hype, how to handle those injuries with the weird timelines like we were just talking about. Talked more about closing line value, some CLV talk like I did with Sam Sherman last week, game stacking, how he kind of approaches the week 17 stuff, so much more. It was a great conversation, great back and forth. So without further ado, here is that interview with Chad Candles. So Chad, we get a lot of like crazy hype from beat reporters this time of year. As you know, everyone's in the best shape of their life. Everyone's crushing it in camp. But, I asked this last week and I think it's just an important thing to talk about and discuss. Like, how do you manage what beat reporters are saying and what's coming out of these camps in order to not get like too overconfident in players that could be zeros? Because look, there's a lot of like day 3 wide receivers right now that are getting a ton of love. And we know statistically a lot of day 3 wide receivers won't do anything. So how do you kind of balance that?
Yeah, again, I listened to Sherman's answer to this and it's hard to come up with much different. These beat reporters get like way hyped into things that as, best ball players and drafters we're not as excited about. And usually it's like big contested catches. Like that looks really cool. And the beat reporters get really excited about it. And you get that self-fulfilling, like, the players that are getting hype in the algorithm are who the beat reporters are going to write about because it promotes it. And you end up in this just like vortex of specific players. The more actionable stuff is who's running with who, the sort of snap counts, that kind of thing. But again, just like players looking good to beat reporters. I mean, they're all going to look awesome. Like you said, like in shorts and without pads, like this is the time of the year for all that.
Yeah.
Again, just try to like focus on the stuff that seems a little more actionable than just the hype machine.
Yeah, and that's interesting too. Like I remember when I was prospecting some of these day 3 guys, like, like a Caleb Douglas was definitely someone that could just get downfield and he has that ability. And I'm not surprised that like he would look good. But I think one of the more interesting guys is like Jacoby Lane right now, who's just getting tons and tons of steam. And obviously there's like kind of an opening in Baltimore and I get all of that. But if you go back and you watch him in college, the Zap model was like pretty lukewarm on him. Like didn't say he's a smash, didn't like necessarily hate him or anything like that. He had an early declare profile. The one thing was that like Lane always had these like acrobatic catches, like one of the best at doing that in this class. And so to your point, like that's the perfect kind of, I'm not saying that he's going to be a zero this year. I think he's going to get some run, but I'm trying to not like take it too far based on what they're saying out of camp. And then obviously he does what he does in the preseason, finds the end zone and, he's just getting steamed up every more. So it's a hard thing to balance, but I do think that, it's a lot easier for these like beat reporters to say these things without it actually having as big of a deal from a fantasy football perspective, in total.
The Lane stuff I'm a little more into because again, I chased Tez Walker. That didn't work out. We're all in the hunt for something better than Bateman. Likely he's gone. And the fact that he does seem like he's drawing more praise than Surratt feels like maybe there's finally something to this. I don't know. They took 2 receivers. I don't know how committed they are to Bateman ending the year as wide receiver 2. So I've been buying the Lane stuff. And with Caleb Douglas, I like that. I'm a Dolphins fan. Yeah. It seems like the Douglas thing is kind of real, although Chris Bell just got activated, which is like way faster than I was expecting. A little bit surprised there. But yeah, those 2 examples I'm I'm buying the hype, so maybe I'm ignoring my own advice here a little bit.
No, but the thing is though, is that it all comes down to cost too in the end. And to me, I don't think that they're getting so out of hand from a cost perspective that you're taking on some insane opportunity cost and drafting them, right? It's more so like I'm trying to not, get them in every draft or go like that route. You know what I mean?
Right.
By just kind of buying into the steam. So it's a good call out though. We're getting a lot of injuries right now too, even before we started recording this earlier this morning. Now this will be out on Wednesday, so we're going to know a lot more, but like even Breece Hall has an apparent groin injury, and a lot of these returns put these guys like at week 1. There's just players that like seemingly their timelines are just like at week 1, we don't know what to do. So I guess my question for you from a best ball perspective, obviously in season long, you can play someone else on your bench and there's no bye weeks going on. So it's a little bit easier, or, you can manipulate your lineup if you do miss on that player. But in best ball, it's a little bit different. You're taking on these guys and you can't use the waiver wire to do anything to make up for someone who is hurt and not playing. So my question to you is, are you generally leaning into those falling values with those injured players, or do you avoid them completely, or do you just take a case by case?
I've sort of lived by the axiom, like risers don't rise enough, fallers don't fall enough. And maybe that's more performance than injury, but I feel like it's still true at least some of the time. I think for the injured players, I'm a lot more worried if it's someone who is in like a training camp fight, or, a rookie who we think might come along later, because that could really delay things. Lemon is the big example for me. I now have like a lot of concern with Mekhi Lemon. Is he, going to be ready week 1? It sounds like probably not at this point. I'm not entirely sure. If they're humming along, if Wicks is playing well, if they're in the playoff hunt, like, are they really going to ramp him up as fast as we want? I don't know. It just seems like getting out of the gate slow for some of these guys on these competitive teams. The younger guys might be tough.
Yeah.
The players who have more of a moat around them, I'm not worried. The sort of like Metcalf and Downs, if I can get a little bit of, actually Metcalf and Pittman, I think both of them are not practicing. Yeah. If I can get a dip on them, I'm not really worried. They don't have any competition breathing down their neck. They're going to be fine. So I think for the veterans, I'm a little less concerned about. For the younger players, I'm going to be a lot more cautious.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. I've had a really hard time clicking Lemon for the same reasons. And I mean, what could go wrong with a lot of Dontavian Wicks, right? Like what could possibly go wrong with my best ball season with like 16% Dontavian Wicks, right?
It feels like one of those, you look at a lineup that's like made the playoffs and you're like, oh, why is Dontavian Wicks on this team?
Oh, 100%. You get a team that advances and you're like, oh my gosh, why did I draft Dontavian Wicks? Why didn't I do that? Yeah. Another question I have, and this is one that I talked with Sam last week about, but I think it's, really important to the point about injuries and getting those falling values, but also injuries that we assumed, like a Malik Neighbors. Closing line value. Some people make a big deal out of it. I've kind of had this take where I made a big deal out of it last year. I feel like I'm making less of a deal about it this year. But if you drafted like a lot of Stephon Diggs, right? Let's say that you're at like 14 or 15% Stephon Diggs and you're way ahead of the market and you got him at a really reduced price compared to where he's going now, or Jonathan Brooks, obviously, because the Chuba Hubbard, just another one of those injuries that's going right up against that week 1 time frame. Are you done drafting those players because you know that you captured that CLV and you know that those lineups are going to have at least some advantage with those guys, or do you continue drafting them even though they are at an increased price?
I'm definitely going to still be taking those players who have been risers. At the end, I will just have different combinations with those players for the same reason. I'm not going to avoid players who have risen that I was kind of out on.
Yeah.
I only had 4.5% Diggs. I thought I had like 8 to 10%. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to not take him. Like I have to take him now. I'm just going to have to hope that my, whatever round 8 pick is better than the round 10 pick. You know what I'm saying? Like the different like variations you get with the players. I don't want to just say like, oh, well, if I still like the player, I don't want to now start fading a player who's been a riser. Again, going back to something I do believe is that risers don't rise enough, fallers don't fall enough. I think I'm just going to get different players. And again, at the end of the day, you make these finals, BBM, for example, I'm still only going to be playing 660 whatever people. Yeah. I'm not running a giant GPP where I'm worried that I have some kind of like huge disadvantage of the combination. So if it's a player you need, I feel like it's a player you need, and I'm not going to start fading them.
Yeah, that's kind of where I've come around to. It's like, Is there an advantage? Sure. But at the same time, the way that these playoffs are structured and the way that this all works, it's, like Malik Neighbors going in late round 2 as opposed to early round 4 or something like that. Like, of course, we would all rather have Malik Neighbors in round 4. But number one, if he's the guy that you need, then that doesn't really matter because you're getting, and you're in number 2, you're getting different combinations, as you noted. And those combinations are, guys, I mean, we have no idea how that's going to just fall into place, right? Like the team that drafted Malik Neighbors in some of your drafts in round 4 or got a crazy discount on him if he fell to round 5 or something like that. How do we know that the rest of their team isn't littered with injured players? Or
they have Ricky Pearsall, some
right,
of the time.
Right. There are just so many iterations to it where, I try not to overthink that part. That's one thing that I feel like I've learned talking to people like you too, is I just feel like it's overthinking it a little bit by just ignoring a player who, you're doubling down on. If you're doubling down on Malik Neighbors like that, that's just a very risky thing to do because it's Malik Neighbors.
Yep. And I did this last year. I was out on Rashee Rice. I was like, no, I don't really like him. I was worried about this. I'm a lawyer by trade. I should have known nothing ever happens, and nothing happened. Yeah. And I got bailed out by him getting hurt. I was absolutely wrong. The fade was bad, but I could have had a really, really, disastrous fade on a guy just because I was stubborn about not wanting to take him a round and a half ahead of where you could have gotten him.
Yeah. Yeah. This also kind of leads into the conversation of unique combinations. Are you somebody who, and this isn't on, I sent you a show sheet beforehand just to kind of go over what we generally talk about, but are you a unique combos guy? You're in the beginning you're at the 1-2 turn and you just take a late second guy, like a Nico or something like that, because he'll fall to that side of the board then.
I'm not a huge unique combos bro. Maybe more so in the daily games. I'm more interested in that. So many of the fantasy relevant players in, best ball and 18 round draft are getting drafted. Whereas in the 6-person, 6-round drafts, you really can get a pretty big edge by going a little off script.
Yep.
I'll do it sometimes if I want a particular player in combo that I like. But my problem is 100, you get 150 bullets in these large contests. There's 12 draft slots. Is the one time I pull up this player, the one time it's going to advance and get to a you run into this really narrow path and then it has to get to the final that I get to one every 8 years is this weird combo. And then I don't know, I'll do it sometimes, but it won't be for the purpose of getting unique. It'll just be because I actually think these two players are good, and
it's just the optimal thing to do and the optimal choice. It's not suboptimal, I should say. Right. It's not necessarily the most but today, for instance, I did a Millie today and I was in the 11 spot. I took Kenneth Walker and Chase Brown, right? And the reason to me, it's all kind of one giant tier. And but at the same time, I would almost guarantee you that there's fewer of that combo just simply because most first rounders, both of them are technically second rounders in ADP. Yeah. But I don't really see a big difference between Kenneth Walker and Saquon Barkley. There's just no reason for me to force that issue. So that's really the only time that I would really push that. I know that we're kind of going on a tangent here, but I do think that this plays into what we were talking about earlier with some of these overhyped rookies to a degree, where one thing that I'm trying, and I'm wondering if you think about this at all, or if this is top of mind for you, but Cyrus Allen getting the love that he's getting. And obviously there's still a low probability chance that this really, really works out, or Jacoby Lane or Caleb Douglas, whatever. Right. But with that being said, with these contests like the Millie that's been going on since May, a lot of those guys just weren't drafted at all for the first couple of months of best ball season. And so by drafting them now, even if you're only at 3 to 5%, you're probably going to end up being above market to a degree, maybe 5% or so, just because no one was drafting them earlier on, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense there. Yeah. And I've been, Cyrus Allen is a tough one for me because I've been stubborn, but he's still only a 16th round pick. That's and there's so many bad picks there. No, that never works. You'll never get the late round Chiefs receiver never pans out. And I just list all the bad ones. And it's but what if this works?
What if this is the one? I mean, I went into this prospect season and after the draft where I was and I said this on so many podcasts, I was guys, this wide receiver class is going to be the Wild West. This is the day 2 picks, especially. I liked the top 4, in Tyson and Carnell Tate and Mekhi Lemon and Casey Concepcion. But after that, I was put them in a hat and just draw randomly. You know, my tiers were really big and we were going to see someone emerge out of nowhere just because of the volume of day 2 wide receivers we had. But it was tough to figure out. I mean, we might not see any, but I think we're on the verge of, you know, the Striblings, the Caleb Douglas maybe for your Dolphins. We'll see. But I think we're on the verge of seeing one of them.
We were so unsettled on who was actually going to be a good pick in this sort of weaker class. Yeah. But then we're all like, no, there's no possible way that, you know, this that this player we weren't in on is better than you know, Surratt or Lane.
Right. Exactly. Like it's silly to me to like latch on to priors that like I'm not. If I were to redo a rookie draft right now, I still would not be drafting Dazon Stribling over Casey Concepcion over Mekhi Lemon, you know, whatever. But I have no. I think I had him at wide receiver 8 to 10 post draft Stribling. I would have no problem putting him at like wide receiver 5 right now. Yeah. I think that's a very valid thing to do, just based on the like we get more information, and it was seriously just chaos, you know, after the big 4, in my opinion. You know, some people might like Omar Cooper, some people might like Denzel Boston, whatever. I get it. But like, it seems not egregious at all to just react to something that's just flat in nature, you know?
Yeah.
Let's look at game stacking. This is something that a lot of people always have questions about. To you, how important is game stacking? Like, are you trying to get at least one playoff game / week 17 bring back for every stack you complete? Or do you feel like when you do that, you often become a little bit more suboptimal with your choices?
Yeah, you know what? You sent me the show sheet, and I was thinking about this one a lot. And the answer is yes. I want to be stacking these week 17 games because at the end of the day, that's where all the money is in these best ball contests. Like, we need to win week 17. But the problem is even if you know which games go off, it's very hard to like pick the right pieces from it. Mm-hmm. And B, you know, you pair together players at a higher rate. They're completely uncorrelated for the entire season until you get to that week 17 game. So what I don't like to do is constantly pair the same like late round player with the same early round player. Like, I don't always want to be taking, say, Greg Dulcich on my Josh Allen teams because I'm like, okay, this is the week 17 bring back. Because then it's going to be just like those two are going to be overrepresented together. Mm-hmm. But I do want to be thinking about week 17 stacks. But I worry that there's this like mantra like, oh, I'm going to break the tide of the week 17 game. And then you end up just like pairing two completely uncorrelated players together a lot. But by the same token, week 17, like Sherman's BBM team, he had Purdy, and across from that he had Caleb. Yep. Or excuse me, he had Luther Burden. And that was like, you know, what he needed to win the contest, right? So it's obviously super important, but it's really hard to figure out like who in a given game is who you need. And, you know, are you constructing suboptimally, like you said, and just like breaking the tie to a week 17 stack that otherwise doesn't matter the rest of the year?
Yeah, this is one of those things for me where it's like completely anecdotal, where I had, you know, I had a top 50 milli team last year and it was correlated and it had the same stack, same San Francisco, Chicago stack, not burden, but, you know, had that game stacked. And you go through it and you're like, okay, I get why we're doing this. But again, it's like once you're there and once you're in it, and so that's the big question, right? Like you don't want to just force the issue necessarily because you got to get there. But I do like the point of making sure that you're not just getting like the same combos over and over again. I think that's really, really important.
Yeah.
When we look back on the season, this is another one that everyone's been talking about in terms of you know, the optimal strategy to take, especially with people going a little bit more robust RB this year. But like when we look back, what do you think we will say was the optimal strategy? Was it robust RB, zero RB, no strategy at all? How do you feel about it?
So what my answer is and what I'm doing are two different things, which is not great. I think this zero RB is going to work, but I lack the courage to do it enough.
Yeah.
It's very hard to properly do it. So robust RB feels really safe. And if everyone stays healthy, I think robust RB will be the best. I mean, running backs are the most projectable. They score the most touchdowns, etc. We just haven't had that high profile running back injury or injuries where there has been a clear backup to step in and absorb the role. In retrospect, if Jonathan Taylor goes down it's going to be very clear, oh, you should have been taking McGowan or Giddens, like if those guys smash. The problem is there's 12 running backs we're taking in the first 2 rounds. We don't know who the backup is on a bunch of them. Yep. And so you get to the end of drafts and you're like, oh, well, or you're trying to build a 0 RB team. You could be like right about a lot of things and just not get, not put all the pieces together.
Right.
So I think sort of like in the abstract, I think there probably will be some really good 0 RB picks. Like if you're building around like your Tank Dells, your Ray Davises, like some of those guys are likely to be hits, but like they're going to be zeros a lot. Like they're going to be zeros for best ball more often than not. So again, it's hard in a contest where you only have 150 bullets to like create the exact funnel down. And then you also have to get the other stuff right too. Like you have to pick the right receiver. Like, I don't know. So it's very uncomfy. I think 0 RB has a good shot to work this year because there are really nice receiver values because everyone's pushed the running back so far, but it's very hard for me to like I do build 0 RB. I build like all the different structures. I'm going to get about 1,000 drafts done. I'm not going to do only robust RB,
right?
But true 0 RB is probably the one I do the fewest. And it's usually from like draft spots 3 through 5. Just the way the boards go, which I also don't love, but that's a whole other tangent because it's very comfy to start with your Jamar Chase, your Drake London, and then whatever your 3rd round wide receiver du jour. And then you're like, okay, I'll take, Judkins or 2. Like these kind of like build themselves down.
Yep.
It could be exactly what you need, but I'm almost talking to myself here. I'm like, I kind of want to try it over on the right side of the board a little more than maybe I'm doing.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's a really good point. I also think that like what you're saying too is sort of this like, do you think that the general best ball audience feels like in order to win in best ball, your lineup has to be perfect as opposed to the lineup just has to be like really good? I do agree from like a 0 RB perspective. If you were to think about like what ends up being an optimal way or an optimal lineup at the end of the season in hindsight, if you were to play best ball for the season, like just looking back and saying like, oh, I could play this running back, like what would that ideal lineup look like? I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a decent amount of 0 RB type builds because, if a running back gets hurt and a backup steps in and all of a sudden you have these very cheap, backup running backs and very good wide receivers and tight ends and such. But then at the same time, to your point, I think what you're kind of describing is this idea that, while you're drafting, you're recognizing that you can still hit a 90th percentile outcome and still win and still do really, really well because in that playoff week, you could hit on Pitts and then get that really good week 17 correlation matchup. And then all of a sudden you're good to go. Like, would you agree with that? That it's sort of like what's optimal from like a mathematical looking back perspective. All of these games already were played versus you're making these decisions right now. It's really easy to say, hey, McGowan's the dude that we wanted. Oh, it ended up being, DJ Giddens.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that as well. And maybe that's part of my issue is like feeling that I need to be perfect on everything. And you don't. I mean, 2 years or was it, I guess 3 years ago now, the winning PBM team had like Pacheco in like round 6 and he like didn't play. Like you don't need to nail everything right.
The way that these things are structured too, it's like a lot of teams that make it to the finals barely got out of round 1, it's not going to just be this like perfect linear, oh, I just dominated throughout the playoffs type of scenario and situation. There's going to be some luck involved. There's going to be some other factors that are involved that shows you that it doesn't have to be perfect. So I think it's a good thing to bring up because, a lot of people are like, oh, I can't, screw this one up because my team it's like, okay, yeah, you ideally don't want to take zeros. I totally agree with that. But then at the same time, if your lineup is not ideal, you can still do okay. You can still win out. One place that I've had a lot of struggle with, like this is more so with the late round draft guide, I'd say, than anything else. But, I'm giving players to avoid in that guide. And I'm giving a couple of those like top 30 wide receivers and I just don't, I have a confidence level of 1, I rate confidence levels for these things and for these players to target and avoid. And these guys have confidence levels of 1 because I look at the top 30 wide receivers and I'm like, I don't really mind any of them to a degree. Are there any fades for you in that range or are you kind of in the same boat?
For me, it's just been Igbuka. weirdly enough. I don't know why. I maybe it's just I'm salty because I was taking a ton of him in the big board last year, and I absolutely hated that he went to Tampa. Like, I thought it was terrible. I was also a bit of a McMillan truther. I was like, they don't need him. They have McMillan. Like, what are we doing here? Then I kind of let separation score Twitter get to me last season, where, you know, he was producing, but like people were like, he shouldn't be. He's getting lucky, all this, that, and the other. I don't know. It's part of it is like, I don't know. The Tampa Bay did sort of fall on their face last year. I mean, Baker got hurt. The whole thing kind of had systemic collapse, and now Evans is gone. So should I be in on Igbokwe? Maybe, but I also feel like there's a chance Godwin's just a wide receiver 1, and we're getting him 50 picks later. So I'm a little bit heavier on Godwin. Igbokwe is probably the closest thing I have to a full fade. Now with the toe injury stuff, if he starts falling, again, he's a guy that I'm not necessarily worried about his role. I don't really think there's, although, you could quibble. He was maybe losing a little bit of work at the end of last year. Again, last year was so hard to judge with the injuries and the team just kind of collapsing. But yeah, Igbokwe is probably the one guy I've been out on.
Do you think that if his ADP does fall a little bit more, I mean, it's falling slightly, it hasn't been like dramatic, but like, do you think that you would end up buying back in at least a little bit?
I might use it as a chance to buy back in. But again, it's like, going back to it before, if I get him at 35 versus 30, or, it's like, well, now I'm just pairing him with different people. I like all of them. So it's
yeah. I mean,
it just makes you feel good. It makes you feel like, hey, I got a discount.
Yeah. No, I feel you. If you're not into a player, don't force the issue necessarily, right? One other thing I want to ask is, with draft rooms now just having so much more information on sleepers and such, do you have any players right now with them? To me, it's becoming a little bit more difficult to find like your favorite late round picks, right? Do you have any favorites that are going really late right now in these drafts?
So I was getting warm on Caleb Douglas. I was taking him. I see him going like round 14 sometime. I'm like, we're starting to get pricey. Yeah. Pat Bryant, I don't feel like has risen enough.
Yes, agreed.
You can still get him late, which I find very surprising. And I don't know if that's because, again, the Cyrus Allen, Jacoby Lane, and Caleb hype has kind of pushed them up. I would say Pat Bryant's a big one. Those are like the late guys I want to be in on, and I'm going to give you a gross name.
I want to hear the grossest name. Give me the grossest name you can. Yeah, let's hear.
I stopped clicking him, but I was taking some Xavier Thomas.
Yeah, I've clicked some Xavier Thomas too. All right, we'll be Xavier Thomas bros together.
Let's go. Let's go. I don't know. It seems like he could carve himself out a little bit of a role. I mean, last I saw on Twitter, he was getting yelled at by Ben Johnson for like messing up a pre-stat motion, and I'm like, I don't know. I haven't heard from him since. So I hope he's not like running with the fives. But you know,
yeah. I mean, he was, from my perspective as like a prospect profiling perspective, he was gadgety. But I think gadgety can, he's super, super fast. Gadgety can work in a Ben Johnson offense, right? Like, I kind of viewed him as like and I know they have Khalif Raymond, but like this could be his new Khalif Raymond type player. So I've thrown a dart his way in like bringbacks or bear stacks, because it's not like the Bears are super easy to stack. In that game, week 17 game is like impossible to stack against Detroit. So it's a way to at least get some player, in that offense, as a bring back or part of the stack. Yeah.
I mean, you talk about a guy who might get more of a role as the season goes on. Yeah. I mean, who knows? They could use him in the running game a bit.
Exactly. I could see it. I'm assuming your bold take here at the end is not going to be about Xavier Thomas, but no. I would love to hear a bold take for this 2026 fantasy season.
All right. My bold take, I think Malik Willis finishes as a top 6 quarterback on the season.
I love that. Yeah.
In on Malik Willis.
Yeah. Is there any hesitation for you from a best ball perspective? Because you obviously, you can't, is there any worry, I guess, from there? Like, I haven't really had much concern about like him being benched or something like that. Yeah.
And so I've gotten this wrong, because I didn't think there was any worry that Justin Fields would get benched last year. And it feels a little like, well, true Justin Fields has never been tried. Like we can get there. We just need someone with the courage. Like, I don't know. I think I really don't think there's much of a Malik Willis bench risk. I really don't think that's the case. He looked, again, I don't like looking too much into preseason performance, but he looked competent moving that offense. It did feel like he had command of the team. I don't know. I don't have too much worry. Yeah, it could be a bit up and down. The Dolphins are projected to be really lousy, but if they're willing to stick to the plan of having him run the ball like 10, 12 times a game, like he could he could have a monster year. He could have 1,000 yards rushing. And if the passing game isn't complete, his one trait that everyone says, well, at least he's good at like the deep ball. I think he's good at more than just that, but that sounds pretty fantasy friendly to me. Like if he doesn't need high volume, like, oh no, all he can do is throw deep touchdowns. Like, oh, all right, I'll take that. That sounds great. They're going to be losing and he's throwing deep. Like, sign me up.
Right.
So yeah, I'm in on Malik Willis. Could be bad.
Also, like, do you find yourself going 3 QB often, or so? Like, I feel like that's another like sort of insulation with Malik is that even if he gives you 11 weeks or something like that, and that you're getting the mobility, you still have the backup of a couple of other quarterbacks if you're going with 3 quarterback builds, and you still have a couple of stacks if those teams do advance.
Yeah. I feel like he's perfect for 3 QB builds. Like if I don't have to rely on him every week, if he does have that 1 week where he just gets completely shut down, fine.
Totally agree. Chad, this was great, man. Let everyone know where they can find you, what you've been doing, and where they can watch some of your content.
Yeah, Chad Candle's YouTube channel. I stream best ball drafts 8:30 a.m. every weekday, and I'd love for you to come on by and hang out in the mornings. It's a good time.
Yeah, it's great. You're doing awesome work. So I really appreciate the time and you hopping on. Everyone else, make sure you're subscribed to this podcast. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can watch this on YouTube as well at Late Round FF. Otherwise, everyone, thanks for tuning in.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.